As for attacks on our critically important infrastructure, and on energy infrastructure in particular, of course these strikes lead to some problems. That is logical. We are now observing a certain shortage, but it is not critical.
Zelensky pays the price for strikes on Russian oil infrastructure as Moscow intensifies retaliation. Russia, Ukraine trade deadly strikes across multiple fronts as the battlefield violence escalates. Russia pounds Zaporizhzhia. Deadly attack leaves civilians dead and many more injured. Belgorod bleeds as Ukrainian drone strikes keep Russia's border region under sustained pressure. Russia-Ukraine war intensifies as Putin claims fresh battlefield gains while fighting rages across the front lines.
Let me remind you that the goal for Russian troops in the Sumy and Volchansk directions is to create a security zone along our borders. The Ukrainian regime will pay for its crimes incurred with the loss of territory that we need to create a security zone in the border areas. About 10.5 kilometers remain to the city of Sumy. We can now turn our attention back to the combat operations of the southern group of forces, which is fighting to liberate one of the most important strongholds on the Ukrainian armed forces' strategic defensive line, in the town of Konstantinovka. 96% of the town is now under Russian control.
A Russian airstrike on Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia killed 2 people and injured 16 others, according to the Associated Press. Ukrainian authorities said 2 children were among those wounded, while a residential house and a civilian vehicle were destroyed. Officials said one of the victims was a 53-year-old woman, while the identity of the second person killed had not yet been confirmed. Russia's Belgorod region also came under Ukrainian drone attack, with local officials reporting 1 fatality. Moscow said its air defense systems shot down 213 Ukrainian drones over Russia, Crimea, and several nearby regions. Kyiv said Russia launched 142 long-range drones and 8 missiles during its latest overnight aerial barrage. Ukraine said its air defense forces intercepted 125 drones and 7 missiles before they could reach their intended targets. Russia said its Vostok group captured Pizantsy in the Dnipropetrovsk region and Novosolovka in the Zaporizhzhia region. Moscow said Russian assault units were also continuing offensive operations around Konstantinovka in the Donetsk region. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed its forces liberated 26 buildings while clearing Ukrainian defensive positions in the area. Russia said its 25th Army captured 5 Ukrainian strongholds along with 59 buildings in the Krasny Lyman sector. Moscow also claimed Russian strikes destroyed 2 Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jets at a military airfield. The Russian Defense Ministry added that its forces struck drone boat storage sites, fuel facilities, and positions used by foreign mercenaries.
As for attacks on our critically important infrastructure, and on energy infrastructure in particular, of course these strikes lead to some problems. That is logical. We are now observing a certain shortage, but it is not critical. I will explain now. There are several tasks that we must solve. We have just discussed this with colleagues. The first task is to quickly and profoundly boost production of the most in-demand air defense systems, constantly improve them in accordance with combat operations underway, and protect the relevant facilities taking into account what the enemy is using and what is being supplied there from Europe, new unmanned aerial vehicles with new technologies. We have all these means of protection. The question is the speed of increasing their production and delivery to the troops, all for protecting critical infrastructure facilities. It is also clear what needs to be done to ensure normal supply, to get rid of this temporarily arisen shortage. It is necessary to complete repairs more quickly, to establish the required volume of imports and, as I have already said, to protect these facilities reliably. Coordination is also necessary in the work of all levels and structures involved in repelling drone and missile attacks on our infrastructure, and most importantly, people. The main task is the protection of people, the civilian population. The next one is minimizing damage to the economy, to separate sectors of production, to industry. As I have already said, there is some damage, but all damaged facilities are restored quite quickly, and the resulting problems are not critical. Everything is operating steadily, with a large margin of safety. As for energy supplies to Crimea, the minister reported that the monthly requirement was 70,000 tons. Crimea now has reserves for several days. But the needs will be met, and we will increase these supplies both by land and by sea. I am sure that this task will be solved. Our media, internet sources, war correspondents provide very comprehensive and objective information on this matter. Let us start with the northern group of forces. Let me remind you that the goal for Russian troops in the Sumy and Volchansk directions is to create a security zone along our borders. This task was set after Ukraine's invasion of the Kursk region and continuing attacks on our border areas. The Ukrainian regime will pay for its crimes incurred with the loss of territory that we need to create a security zone in the border areas. About 10.5 kilometers remain to the city of Sumy regional center, a small city with over 30,000 buildings. This is a regional center, as I said, with 30,000 houses. We have no political plans regarding this city and the region as a whole. We will be guided by the proposals of the Defense Ministry and the General Staff. Troops in this direction are conducting combat missions actively, decisively, advancing at a rapid pace. Let's move on, from north to south, and speak about the western group of forces. It is a large area of responsibility. I will begin with the city of Kupiansk, in front of whose monument representatives of the Kyiv regime like to pose for photos. Our troops are located between 2.5 and 4 to 5 kilometers from the western edge of the city. The enemy has already launched a series of counterattacks, but without success. The settlement of Rupsi, the Rubtsovskoy direction, on the left bank of the Stary Oskol River, we have effectively blocked a motley enemy grouping of about 5,000 people. It is pinned down against the river. The 1st Tank Army of the Russian Armed Forces is advancing from the north and closing in on the enemy. The 3rd Motorized Rifle Division is advancing from the east, and the 144th Division from the south. There are about 2 kilometers left until complete, final encirclement. Everything there is already under fire control. This 144th Division is tasked with accomplishing this task, and I believe it will succeed. And then the fate of this enemy grouping will be similar to the one that already was in the area of Kupiansk-Yuzavoy. And, if you recall, the group there, which was in roughly the same position, was completely wiped out. Next is the town of Krasny Lyman. This is a Krasnoliman sector. It is a fairly large settlement, a town with around 11,000 homes. But that is not the point. The point is that it is one of the largest railway marshalling yards in the former Soviet Union and the most important logistics center in the DPR. Here, 149 out of 11,000 houses remain to be liberated. Now let me remind you of one more thing. The Ukrainian armed forces spent nearly 10 years building a major fortified area as a strategic defensive line in the conurbation comprising the towns of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkovka, Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka, and the town of Konstantinovka, as well as just southwest of the towns of Dobropolye and Okoretino. All of this lies within the area of responsibility of the southern and central groups of forces. The 3rd Army of the Southern Group is advancing at a good pace towards the town of Slavyansk and has entered the village of Nikolaevka. It is approximately 8 to 9 kilometers from Slavyansk itself. The offensive is proceeding successfully across 15 sectors, with our troops advancing in this direction every day. Significant developments have taken place in the area of responsibility of the Central Group. Here, our troops have breached a 3-tier line of engineering obstacles, approximately 400 meters deep, across 4 sectors and are engaged in fighting to capture the defensive line. Very significant developments have also taken place on the Dobropolye front. On the Dobropolye front, our troops have breached a well-prepared 3-row line of engineering obstacles previously considered impregnable and have entered the village of Anovka, which neighbors Dobropolye. They have also advanced directly towards the town of Dobropolye from the north. Outside Dobropolye, and I would like to draw your attention to this, the Ukrainian armed forces have no pre-prepared defensive lines. They are now trying to hastily establish local strongpoints, whilst the distance from Dobropolye to the state border is 35 kilometers. We can now turn our attention back to the combat operations of the southern group of forces, which is fighting to liberate one of the most important strongholds on the Ukrainian armed forces' strategic defensive line, in the town of Konstantinovka. 96% of the town is now under Russian control. The 4th Brigade is mopping up the town, whilst the 6th Division of the Southern Group has already bypassed Konstantinovka and reached Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka, entered the town, taken Tukhachevsky Street, and is moving on. Our forces on the left flank have also reached this settlement, Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka. Next will be Druzhkovka itself, a fairly large settlement with 12,000 homes, which adjoins Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka. It is only 4 kilometers from Druzhkovka to Kramatorsk, which the current authorities in Kyiv regard as a temporary capital of Donetsk, and there are no significant fortifications there either. As far as we know, and as has already been reported in the media, the enemy has begun evacuating industrial enterprises from this conurbation. I would also like to highlight a particular operation carried out by the Eastern Group of Forces. Despite the enemy's reinforced offenses, the enemy has redeployed troops from the Donetsk People's Republic, well-trained troops, to the Zaporizhzhia sector. Here our troops, under the command of Colonel General Andrei Sergeyevich Ivaniev, are carrying out combat missions to liberate the Zaporizhzhia region. Across a broad front, they are advancing between 1 kilometer and 1.3 kilometers daily. The Dnieper Group of Forces also has a large area of responsibility. It is fighting successfully in the Orakov direction and is operating along the shore of the Kakhovka Reservoir, generally towards Zaporizhzhia.